Welcome back, you're watching Overdrive. We've reached a point now where a tight budget is no longer a reason to deprive yourself of all the bragging rights that come with owning an SUV. In this regard, the Tata Punch has been our pick, but now we're wondering whether the Citroën C3 can change our mind with its unique perspective on this matter.
We've now reached a point where having a tight budget is no longer reason enough to deprive you of all the bragging rights that come with owning an SUV. Now the Tata Punch has been a pick in this regard if you have less than 10 lakhs to spare, but can the Citroën C3, which brings a new take on this segment, make a difference? Now Citroën insists on calling the C3 a hatch, but it can more than hold its own against the clearly SUV-inspired Tata Punch with its added 154 mm of length. And it's a handsome car with Citroën doing a great job of distilling its family face onto this more affordable package. The Punch also draws inspiration from the Harrier and Safari with its split headlamp look and the two-step grille arrangement. But both use contrasting colors to add more presence, but the Punch is beefed up further with more cladding. The Punch has a larger boot at 366 litres against the 315 litres of the C3, but both have quite high load lips, although the Citroën does carve out a flatter, more usable space. Now with the Punch you get a single 1.2 litre naturally aspirated 3-cylinder petrol engine which makes 86 PS and 113 Nm. Now in isolation that's not too bad, but the C3 will also give you the turbo option that we'll come to eventually. But yeah, and this motor, it's like one of the typical Tata petrol engines that we've experienced in recent memory. So it's not the most refined, so when you start off there's noticeable vibrations coming through the steering wheel and through the pedals. But once you do get moving, you realize that the engine is quite drivable. Of course, that's when you're up and running, like we are right now. So there is a wide linear power band. So while in terms of outright pace, it's nowhere close to the C3 Turbo, it's perfectly usable in the kind of conditions you will drive the Punch in. So like you can see, we're just at about 2000 RPM ambling along on these hilly roads, which will translate into you sort of ambling along in traffic quite easily. Of course, overtaking performance is lacking, which means that you will have to say downshift a gear or two to get to the kind of performance that you need to make overtakes and so on. And when you start using the gear lever, it's a 5-speed manual. You also get an AMT with the Punch, which you don't with the C3. You notice that the gear shifts there are quite nice. They're light, the gear lever is light, precise, the throws aren't too long. More importantly, the clutch is progressive, it's got a well-defined bite point. So changing gears is not really that much of a hassle. Now we'll get to what is probably the best part of the Punch, the way it rides and handles. Now the steering is light, it's like how you would expect a city car to be, which means that it'll be again very easy to use in traffic or parking, and it weighs up naturally. I mean, it will not feel some in that sense when you are going a bit harder, putting in more lock, but it's perfectly usable and works very well with the ride and handling character of this micro SUV, if you will. Because the Punch, when you say drive over bad patches like we are right now, it takes them really well. So you'd barely feel any of it. The suspension is very well damped, so very little of it actually filters into the cabin. There's no harsh bumps or jarring sensations coming through to you. In that sense, the Punch is quite an easy car to drive. It's very easy to get used to, and if you are of an enthusiastic bent, it's the better handler of the two here by a small margin. In our real-world mileage testing, we got 16.7 kilometers per litre in the city and 19.7 on the highway with the Punch. The C3 is a much quicker car, but this costs in terms of efficiency, with us managing 11.6 in the city and 16.15 on the highway. Now this is good for a small turbo, but naturally aspirated rivals at this price point are far more frugal. Now you can get the C3 in two engine options, unlike the one that you have in the Punch. So you have a very similar 1.2 litre naturally aspirated 3-cylinder petrol, or what we're driving right now, 1.2 litre turbo petrol, again 3-cylinder. And this motor, this PureTech motor, really is the highlight of the Citroen C3's driving experience, at least in our books, because this turbo petrol, again, it's genuinely impressive in the way it delivers its performance. So to start with, it's quiet, refined. There are not too many stray vibrations. You barely realize that it's a 3-cylinder to begin with. None of those, irritating attributes are there in this motor. It starts off quite cleanly. It's got good low-end torque, unlike the motor in the Punch. Now, turbo lag itself is very well controlled, so you have that clean, wide, linear power band, which makes it again very drivable in the city. Top that, you have quite a good amount of performance with the 110 PS and 190 Newton meters. And as you can see from our 0 to 100 times and our in-gear acceleration times, this C3 will keep up with some much bigger SUVs just in terms of its outright pace. Now the C3, in terms of the way it rides, it can't quite match the softness that the Punch has, especially at low speeds. So it's a bit more European in that regard typically. So you feel the bumps, those typical Indian bumps, potholes, cracks on the road, ditches, a bit more, especially at low speeds in the C3. And at high speeds, there's really not much to choose between the two cars in terms of the way they ride. Now again, the way they handle is also quite similar. We like the steering in the C3 a bit more because at least we personally think it weighs up a bit more naturally as speeds rise, but the difference is marginal. And in terms of handling, the rest of the car, again, it feels solid, it feels substantial, it will stay true to its line largely, so there are no surprises. And over a set of corners, much like the Punch, there's some enjoyment to be had. So if you like driving, then both cars here do have something to offer for you.